Alice leaned against the ancient wall to catch her breath. Her arm radiated pain from the sting. The life forms of this god's forsaken hellhole were unlike anything she'd ever encountered. Brutal, aggressive, and disconcertingly intelligent. For the past 2 days, she'd been fighting for her life against winged abominations that hunted in packs, with stinging projectile spines that could drop a person with a single prick. If she hadn't dosed herself on anti-venom before touching down on this planet, she'd be digesting in their stomachs right about now. But it had all been worth it. She was now in the centre of the precursor ruins, only meters away from the source of the active signal. Standing to her feet, she limped forward on a twisted ankle until she stood inside an ominous ring of tall, black pillars. An intact singularity core, the artifact she'd been searching for 2 decades, was right in front of her. Her hand shook as she retrieved her tools from her shoulder bag. Filled with giddy excitement, she was too absorbed in her work to notice the tall, inhuman figures entering the circle of pillars behind her. Hello and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast where I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. This week's Tale from the Drift was from Emily I. Brown, who turned in this wonderfully spooky piece all the way back in the summer. So I want to offer them, firstly, my eternal gratitude, and secondly, I want to kind of thank them for their patience whilst I have stumbled stop-start through the back end of this second season. And I'd also like to kind of thank you all for your patience here, because I realised the other day that the first season started in May 2021 and ended in November of the same year. So the entire 24 episode season took 6 months. Now, that's because I was pretty disciplined, getting regular episodes out week to week, and I was just generally on it. Now, this second season started in January of this year, and it's now nearly December and we haven't finished. And I just wanted to say that it's been kind of like a struggle, kind of for various reasons. I mean, mainly, it's kind of nothing sinister, like mainly because I've been making a lot of non-campaign content, which has taken up an awful lot of time. But also, I must admit, my discipline has slipped. But I am determined to get to the end of this season and deliver a satisfying finale for you all. And I just wanted to say that I will get there, gang. I promise. If you want to roll some dice and write something for me to read at the beginning of a future episode, then the submission guidelines and contact details are on screen now. And whilst I have you, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes videos, and your name on screen like these lovely people. Last time out, we were thrust into a deadly shootout with a town full of infected soldiers armed to the teeth with an array of powerful weapons. The fighting is fierce, and Archer and Luna split off from the guards that they are accompanying on this mission in an attempt to outmaneuver the slow, sluggish infected. With the team now divided, they all start making incremental progress, which is regularly checked as more and more infected soldiers join the fight. Trying to find another way around, Archer notices a mining chute that runs along the rooftops of one of the rows of buildings and up into the mountains. He and Luna start to navigate this chute before Luna notices the guards are pinned down by the infected on the other side of Main Street. Sensing an opportunity to inflict some casualties and also keep the guards in the fight, she opens fire. From her elevated position, she is able to take some of the infected out, but giving her previously secreted position away, the infected return fire. And in the building directly below her, a hitherto unseen infected soldier shoots a powerful weapon into the ceiling, rupturing the gas pipes and causing a huge explosion. An explosion in which Luna is caught, and Archer watches helplessly on as she is launched into the air by the blast. So that was a rough miss, and we have to pay the price as part of that dice roll. And it pains me to say it, but the most appropriate price to pay is to make the move companion takes a hit, something that in 30, 40 odd episodes of this show so far we haven't had to do yet, but here we are. What does the move say? The move says, when your companion faces physical hardship, they suffer -1 health for minor harm, -2 for serious harm, or -3 for major harm. And this is 100% the move to make. As much as I don't want to, we just kind of have to decide how bad it is. Now obviously, if we rolled a miss with a match, that is the kind of the worst it can be. So that would kind of be the -3 for major harm. And I even though it's kind of serious what's happened, it can't be that bad. We need some wiggle room. So I think it's going to be -2 for serious harm, because I think that being blown up is pretty serious. So we will take Luna's health down from 4 to 2. And then we have the additional option, and we have this every time anyone in the game takes harm, of trying to resist it. And the move says, if your companion's health is 0, or you choose to test their resilience, roll plus your companion's health. And that is a way that we can kind of mitigate some of the damage. Now, I kind of read the move, and I don't really want to do that, because, you know, the consequences of failure are pretty bad. But then as I've been kind of thinking about it this week, like, is that metagaming, to use a kind of a buzzword of our scene? Because the only reason that I wouldn't roll those dice is because I, the player, think the risk is too high. And then I thought, well, if Luna was given the choice of doing this or not, would she choose to resist this harm? You know, would this kind of tough cookie, kind of like streetwise, headstrong, impetuous person kind of just take it, or would she try and kind of like tough it out? And I kind of think we all know the answer. Like, thematically, it makes sense to roll the dice here, as much as logically and game-wise it makes less sense. And I think that given the way I approach this series of being kind of like thematic and, you know, leaning into the narrative more than the rules, I think I'm going to do it. So let's try and resist this harm. Let's test our resilience, rolling plus Luna's health. And that is a miss. That is another miss, and not really anything we can do with the momentum here. So it says on a miss, it's worse than you thought. They suffer an additional -1 health, or you lose momentum. And then if your companion's health is 0, they're out of action until they're given aid. And I'm sorry that this happened. Like, it sucks. But like, a further hit to Luna's health is what I'm going to take, because I think that's narratively appropriate for what has happened. She is an important character, and I think this has weight, and her actions of like charging ahead and opening fire had a dire consequence, and I'm afraid that this is it. So Luna's health is going down to 1. And Archer was like knocked off his feet by that blast, kind of flung backwards by the force, and kind of sliding back like along the chute, kind of several meters, and he kind of like blacked out for a second. And when he kind of comes to, he has this kind of tinnitus, this ringing in his ears, and his vision is all kind of blurry. But as it kind of returns and clears, he can kind of make out these objects in the sky, in this kind of grey brown sky up above him. They're out of focus, but as they start to become clear, he can pick out kind of, you know, bits of metalwork and piping and rocks and kind of sections from the building and bits of the chute. But then he kind of like watches in horror as he sees Luna limp like a rag doll, tumbling through the air along with all this debris. And she's been thrown so high by the blast that he has actually time to get to his feet before she comes back down and disappears from view behind the buildings. Like he can see the area where she landed, but he didn't see her hit the ground, and he has no idea how she is. He knows how tough she is, but that is the kind of fall that's going to easily kill someone, and he needs to get to her. So he pulls himself up using the sides of the chute to get to his feet. And as he does, he looks down onto Main Street and sees the carnage down below. The ground is kind of blackened and scorched, and in places still on fire, kind of singed by the flames from the blast. And the infected have all been kind of like knocked way back. This was a massive explosion, and like as he's seeing it from up here, seeing the kind of like the devastation from up here, his heart sinks, because he knows that there's just no way that Luna could have survived that. No way. In the distance, he can see one of the guards scrabbling to their feet, using the chaos caused by the explosion as an opportunity to try and get the other, who appears to be pretty badly wounded, to their feet. They get them up, and the two of them disappear between the buildings on the side opposite. But as they disappear, the infected start to get up. And we need to figure out what they're doing. So once again, we are going to roll on the Combat Action Oracle. 61 is move in close or grapple. Okay, so Archer can see that as they get to their feet, they start moving towards where the building that just detonated, where that used to be. And by that, he kind of infers that they must be moving on the only enemy they can see. The guards have disappeared. He's up there. So he works out that Luna must be down there and visible, and he's hoping still showing signs of life. And Archer is kind of in a good position. He has the drop on them, but he can't take them all out. He can't shoot them all with his pistol. Whilst they seem to be focused on where Luna is, the best he could do by opening up from up here is kind of buy her some time, and not much of it at that. He needs to get down to her, and he needs to get her out of there. And to do that, he needs a new plan, a change of approach. We don't have the firepower to win this fight, and we are woefully out of position. So we need to do something else. We need to change the approach. And I'm kind of wondering if there is a way that we might be able to use the environment against our enemy. Like we saw how powerful that blast was. Is there something else we can blow up? Could we pull off the classic video game move and kind of shoot some barrels that stood nearby? Or, is there something we can kind of trap the infected with, or crash into the infected? Like, is there something we can use? Because they are massing in this kind of clump and moving on Luna's position, and we won't get a better opportunity to take them all out in one than this. So I've kind of been thinking, I wonder if the conveyor belt still works. Because it's been ripped in two. And if Luna is now behind the buildings, if the infected are trying to get to her, they will have to pass under where the conveyor belt was. So if it still works, and the other half can be kind of turned on, it doesn't matter about the side we're on, but if the other half still works, then the infected will have to pass under where that was. So what if we can turn it on, fire it up, wait for them to be in position under it, and then just like roll all the contents off the end and bury them under rocks and debris? I think that is a plan that could work, and it's definitely something that Archer would think of. This is the most Archer Barlow way out of this, and with no better options and no way that he can fight his way through all these, he is just going to have to try this. So I think as he's getting up and kind of witnessing all this carnage, he is thinking, looking at everything, trying to assess what he can use and how he can use it, trying to come up with a plan, whilst he's also trying to shimmy along the conveyor belt and get closer to Luna to try and see where she is and what condition she's in. And he's trying to stay focused. He's trying not to panic. He's trying not to think of the state that she could possibly be in. And then it kind of comes to him, as he's kind of trying to pull his way through this rubble. What if he uses the conveyor belt? He looks at the twisted metal of the chute and sees the other section on the other side still has lots and lots of heavy-looking material piled up on it. And if he could get it moving at speed, it would definitely crush anyone passing underneath, or at the very least, it would cut off a clear path to Luna. So this is going to be a move, and we are in a bad spot here because of the miss. So that move is going to be React Under Fire, which says when you're in a bad spot and take action in a fight to avoid danger or overcome an obstacle, envision your approach and roll. And we are very much changing the plan. We are using our smarts and trying to figure out a way out of this. So we are going to React Under Fire, rolling plus wits. And that is a strong hit, a very welcome reversal of fortune. We needed it because things were, I'm not going to lie, looking pretty bleak for us at this point. So it says on a strong hit, you succeed and are in control. So let's take that +1 momentum, moves us up to 7. And importantly, most importantly, we're back in control. So Archer is frantically searching around, and he is looking for some controls for this machinery. And he can see just a little bit further up on his side of the chute, there is a small panel with like some simple controls. And he sees it because through the kind of moss that's overgrown it, he can still see the red kind of kill switch. Now, there is a gaping hole in the chute, but the power must still run to the entire thing. Like this town, like as we remarked when we arrived, it's in good working order, and the belt is no different. There's power running to it, so can he get it moving despite the fact that it's damaged? He's staying low, and he can kind of sort of see the infected moving around and getting into position where that building was, and he kind of scrapes away the thick layer of lichen from the control panel, and he slams his fist into the go button, this bright green go button, and the conveyor belt on the other side shudders to life. The chute that runs up to the mountain starts to move, and it moves slowly, very, very slowly, painfully slowly. All the rocks that were near where the blast was got flung into the air, so the chute is actually clear for about 30 meters. And what is coming down the chute is taking an eternity. So he needs to do something. He needs to try and make this thing speed up. There's no like fast and slow buttons. So he's just going to have to improvise, and he's going to have to try and hotwire this thing. So he pulls out some of the wires from behind the panel and kind of just starts randomly sparking them together. And looking along the chute, he sees the belt kind of speed up and slow down and stop, then slow down and start and stop. And it's just not what he needs to do. He's not sure which combination of wires it is to get the desired result. So he's just furiously trying everything. And I think this is going to be another move. And it's probably, because we're in control, going to be gain ground, which says when you're in control and take action in a fight to reinforce your position or move towards an objective, envision your approach and roll. And what we roll against, what stat we choose, is actually open to interpretation. We could probably make an argument for any of these, but what I think it's actually going to be, and I think this is a reflection of our kind of like immediate goal to get to Luna, is we're going to be doing so coming to the aid of others. So that is going to be gain ground, rolling, plus heart. A weak hit, but that will do, because if you're in control and you're trying to gain ground and you get a weak hit, that's fine because you're still in control. On a hit, we get to choose one of the options, and we will take the progress, I think, taking us up to 5 out of 10 and halfway there. But like I said, we're in control, and that is what is the most important thing. So Archer is frantically sparking these wires together, but only watching the conveyor belt kind of inch forward slowly, and he starts to think maybe it's broken beyond repair, maybe it won't budge at all, maybe this is a folly. But the infected are right below the chute now, and he can hear gunfire, so Luna must be fighting back, or at least that's what he hopes. And in one last ditch attempt to fire this thing up before he abandons the plan completely, he takes the frayed ends of a whole bunch of wires and jams them together. And he suddenly feels this electric jolt, this kind of snap of pain through his fingers. And that seems to do it. And the conveyor belt lurches to life, sending tons of rocks and debris hurtling along the chute at high speed. And within seconds, it is tipping over the end where the blast severed the chute in two, and the rocks and the debris come crashing down onto the infected below. But Archer can't see this. He can't see if it's worked. And before it's even happened, he is already running along the chute. He just needs to move and get to Luna, get her out of there. And he's making no effort to hide. He is just charging over there. And he reaches the scorched, fused, missing segment of the chute. And through the dust and the spores that have been kicked up by this avalanche, he can see this pile of rubble and twisted metal, and in amongst it, the remains of the infected. And the belt on the other side is still running, but there's no more rubble to drop, and the belt itself, which is kind of now loose from our end, kind of gathers and bunches and clogs up the mechanism and brings it all to this screeching, juddering halt. And Archer looks down, and through the chaos, he thinks he can see Luna. He thinks he can see the grey-blue poncho in amongst some fungal growths that are kind of sprouting out. But it's hard to tell, and he's kind of hoping that she might have landed on those because that's at least softer than the ground. But it's hard to tell because gunfire starts to rain in on him. Because there are still infected left. There are still 4 of them down on Main Street. They're cut off by the rubble, but they're still very much standing. And they are firing on Archer now. And we're still in control, and he's in a good position. He has cover in the form of the chute, and more importantly, a clear shot. So he's going to use all of that to his advantage and shoot them. We're in control, so this is going to be strike. We are attacking at range, so rolling plus edge. That's a weak hit, and frustratingly, our momentum is of no use there, so we are going to lose control again, unfortunately. It says, on a weak hit, mark progress twice, but you expose yourself to danger and you're in a bad spot. So the progress is nice, but like I said, losing control is not so good. So let's mark the progress. So that's up to 7, and then we'll figure out what's happening. And as always, we will roll on the combat action oracle to see what twists and turns await. 83 is shift the fight to a new area, and I think I know what that's going to be. So let's just tie all this together. So Archer crouches behind the damaged end of the mining chute and kind of takes his time to line up his shots. And as he squeezes the trigger, he manages to drop the nearest infected with a few solid hits. And as the next one steps forward to take its place, he fires on that one, and his shots land true and sends it stumbling to the ground, but hasn't quite finished it off and can see it starting to get back up. He just doesn't have the rate of fire or the stopping power, and the others start to fire back, and in a matter of seconds they have him pinned down, and they're peppering the chute wildly with gunfire. And as he's hunkering down and trying not to be shot, he looks down to see if he can see Luna, and this time, now the air has cleared a little, he can definitely see her, and he can see she's in a bad way. She is doubled over. She is either not moving or moving so slowly it doesn't register. But then, just like that, she is gone. And when I say gone, she's obscured from Archer's view by a shape, a figure. One of the infected that was not caught up in the rock slide, or has pulled itself free, or has gotten around the long way, is bearing down on Luna. And Archer tries to kind of shift to get a better look, but with the incoming fire and everything, it's just not possible to see properly. But what he knows is that Luna does not look like she is in any position or condition to be fighting back. So we're going to do something, because we have to do something. And that something is going to be spectacularly un-Barlow. I think he is unwilling to shoot, because even from this kind of vantage point, he would not want to risk hitting Luna. So he's going to have to take matters into his own hands. And by that, I mean he's going to have to get down there and fight up close. So he holsters his pistol, and there are shots still kind of slamming into the side of the chute from below. And he takes his staff off his back, that multi-purpose space poker that he kind of has and uses from time to time, and kind of unscrews it in the middle to make 2 fighting sticks from the separate halves. And he's going to have to take a running jump to make it down there. He's going to have to leap off the wreckage of the chute whilst being shot at over a massive pile of rubble and onto the infected down below. And then once he's there, that's kind of where his plan ends. He'll just have to improvise. So he steels himself, realizing full well how dangerous and reckless this is, and he runs to the end of the chute and launches himself in the air. So this is going to be, I think, the move Clash. We are not in control, and we are fighting back. And this time it's going to be up close and personal. So this is going to be rolling, much to my displeasure, because it's one of Archer's weaker suits, plus Iron. Another weak hit, and luckily for us, we can kind of fix this, and I'm going to, because I don't think I can personally take much more of this not being in control, and Archer definitely can't, and Luna really, really can't. So we're going to burn our momentum to make this a strong hit. So we will reset our momentum of 7 down to 2. On a strong hit, you mark progress twice and overwhelm your foe. You are in control. So firstly, let's mark that progress. That is 9 out of 10 now, right up to the edge. And now let's envision how we overwhelm our foe. So Archer sails through the air, and not in any way gracefully, I might add. He's kind of flailing his arms as he's hurtling through the air, kind of laser blast and gunfire scorching by, and there's still so much smoke and spore clouds in the atmosphere, and he can barely see where he's going. But that changes real quick, and in a split second, he is crashing into the back of the infected, and they both go sprawling to the ground. As Archer hits the deck, his first thought is to check on Luna, to look and see if she's okay, and he can see that she is moving, but she's moving real slow. She's moving weakly, and she's kind of trying to sit up with great difficulty. Archer springs to his feet, readying his sticks. The infected he just crashed into is much slower to react. And looking at it, he sees it wears a pilot's helmet, a visor covering its whole face, but just below you can see the jaw hanging slack. It has no weapon, but its right arm looks deadly enough. The hand has long since grown over, replaced by a knotted stump covered in lichen, tipped with a sharp hook of solid fungus. It rolls over and gets awkwardly to its feet, but Archer has the drop on it, and he charges in, swinging upwards with one of his sticks, bringing it up beneath the jaw, sending it stumbling backwards. He follows with another blow to this thing's chest, which has little effect against its armour, and strikes again and again, forcing it back. And now he's pushed it back. There is a few metres distance between them, and the infected lunges forward, takes an awkward swing with its hooked limb. But it's slow and it's ungainly, and the swing is telegraphed, and Archer easily ducks below it. And as it's coming forward, Archer stays low and uses this brute's momentum against it, tangling his sticks between its legs, sending it crashing into the rubble. And before it has a chance to get back up again, Archer has moved in, using all of his strength to land one more powerful blow, his forward momentum causing him to stumble after he brings his stick swinging down into the infected's head. And there is a sickening crunch, a puff of spores, and then the infected goes limp, dead, its ordeal finally over. And Archer, after taking a second to check that it's not going to get up again, goes to Luna. She is lying awkwardly, her legs folded underneath her, one arm tucked under her body while she feebly tries to push herself off the ground with the other. Archer rushes over to her and she puts her hand out as if to say she's okay, but she is not okay. She is absolutely not okay. He kneels down next to her and she clings to him for support. And he quickly visually checks to see if she's bleeding or anything. And she doesn't seem to be. She's got a few scrapes and cuts on her hands and arms, and there's some dried blood around her neck where it meets her mask, but nothing more serious. But Archer can tell that she is hurt real bad. She's not moving well, and he hasn't seen her move her legs at all. And he says, "Can you get up?" And she's woozy and struggling to focus, so he pulls off his mask and says, "Luna, can you get up?" And she reaches out and grabs onto Archer's shoulder. And he pulls his mask back down and stands, using all of his strength to haul Luna's dead weight off the ground. She is slight in build, but getting her off the floor was incredibly difficult. She's not able to support herself, and Archer can feel her gripping onto him tightly with one arm, whilst the other hangs limply to her side. He tries to lean so her legs are taking some of the weight, but she hops painfully as her foot touches the ground. If Archer was a betting man, he'd wager that she had at least a broken leg and a broken arm. And seeing how he found her, he guesses she must have landed on her left side as she hit the deck. And the fungus and the spongy moss that she landed amongst would have probably saved her from some more serious damage, but this is still bad. It's real bad, and Archer knows that she needs serious medical attention as soon as possible. But this fight is still going. We're not done. And I think that's reflected by the fact that the last of the infected has clambered up onto the rubble, and it is dragging that huge coffin-sized rocket launcher behind it. And it looks wounded, although it is hard to tell at first glance. But as it moves, every time it does, these telltale wisps of blue spores are seeping out of it from somewhere. And it's actually Luna who sees it first, and she squeezes Archer's shoulder to warn him, who then turns to see it as it starts to haul this huge rocket launcher up into some sort of firing position. We're so close that if it gets the shot off, it will kill us all. But we are still in control here, and I think it's time we finish this. Archer uses his free hand to draw his pistol, and straining with the effort of keeping Luna upright, he lines up a clear shot and pulls the trigger. And this is going to be us ending the fight. We are going to make the move, take decisive action. And that move says, when you seize an objective in a fight, envision how you take decisive action, then roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. Now we're at 9 progress, so it seems as good a time as any to do this. We can't use our momentum here because this is a progress move. So we are completely at the mercy of the dice. And I've just checked our momentum's at 2, so that's not going to help at all anyway. So, right, let's roll against our progress of 9. Never in doubt. It says, if you are in control, check the result as normal. On a strong hit, you prevail, take +1 momentum. If any objectives remain and the fight continues, you're in control. So the fight's not going to continue. We have got a strong hit, so we prevail. Yay! We take +1 momentum, so up to 3, and we can start rebuilding that again. And more importantly, this fight is over. So Archer squeezes off one last shot, and it lands true, just beneath the jawline of the infected, stood at the top of the pile of rubble. And it teeters for a second before it drops the coffin-sized rocket launcher and stumbles and tumbles backwards out of view. And Archer holds the gun trained on the pile of rubble, just half expecting something else to come, but nothing does. And he helps Luna around the back of the buildings and out onto Main Street. He's holding her up on one side, and she's using his staff as like a makeshift crutch on the other. She needs treatment soon, but for now, she's just about able to move with him. As they exit onto Main Street, Archer still has his gun drawn. He's kind of checking, paranoid, like looking for any other lingering threats, but sees none. Just bodies. After checking the coast is clear, he holsters his gun and the guards that were escorting them emerge from the haze on the other side of the street. Much like Archer is holding up Luna, one guard is holding up the other. But as they get closer, it is immediately obvious that the wounded guard is actually dead. And they all just stand in silence, sort of trying to process, like, what the hell has just happened, like what the hell they just fought their way through, like what has happened to this place. And they're exhausted. They are battered and broken and on their last legs. And the silence is finally broken by the distant roar of an engine. And the group turns to see the shuttle that they arrived in cresting the rise over which they trekked just a couple of hours ago. And the relief amongst the group is palpable as they nervously watch it circle briefly before it sets down, about 20 or so meters away from them, in the center of Main Street. And the landing ramp comes down, and after a moment the pilot emerges, gun drawn, obviously trying to assess the situation quickly, trying to work out what's happened. But that said, even if they explained it all to them, like how they have just had this protracted firefight with what appeared to be heavily armed soldiers that had been turned into kind of like mindless, mutated, hyper-violent zombies by a bizarre parasitic fungus. Like, if they'd explained all of that, they would scarcely be believed. And the pilot, after checking over everything, kind of lowers their gun and looks at the wounded guard very quickly too, realizing that they are dead. They usher everyone into the shuttle, and Archer half drags, half carries Luna in, placing her gingerly into her seat. And he begins immediately searching the cabin for a medkit, anything to help her out. And I'm not going to roll for this because obviously there is a heal roll, but like, we don't have the facilities or skills to like fix what is wrong with Luna. If I rolled a strong hit, like, am I automatically going to like unbreak her leg and arm? I don't think that's realistic, and that's kind of dumb. So I'm just going to kind of narratively work this out, and then we'll kind of do something in game at a later date when we are better placed, if we ever get better placed. So I think he finds a field medic's kit, just like a small one in the cockpit, and he kind of rummages through it quickly and finds what he's looking for. It's kind of like a small pen-like device, and he kind of quickly unscrews the cap and exposes this small stubby point, and he unceremoniously plunges it into Luna's left thigh, and she kind of recoils instantly, and Archer has to hold her in a seat by the shoulder, and that would have hurt like hell, but it's pain relief, and it is now working its way through Luna's body, and dulling the agony in which she finds herself. And as she feels it course through her veins and quickly numb pretty much everything, she offers Archer the weakest of thumbs-up gestures before her eyes shutter closed and she passes out. Archer pulls off his mask and turns to the others. The dead guard is laying on the floor of the cabin, and the other guard is sitting in their seat, motionless, just kind of staring into the middle distance. The pilot is crouched by the body. Nothing can be done. They turn to Archer and take off their mask, and the pilot is a stocky man with kind of like pale skin, and he's heavy set, bald with a neat dark beard. He seems calm despite what he's just seen. And he says, "You hurt?" And Archer shakes his head. The pilot looks back at the body and says, "Think you can align the dish?" And Archer kind of just like double takes for a second and suddenly kind of remembers why they're there, but also like gives the pilot this kind of incredulous look. And the pilot then points to the body on the floor and says, "He was our tech guy." And Archer kind of nods and allows himself a wry smile. Of course he's the only one who can do this. Of course he is. He reaches down and grabs the canteen of water that's on the dead guard's belt and takes a long drink and says, "Sure. then let's get the hell out of here. So we are going to need to do the dish before we go. That is why we're here. But before we do, I think it's time we reached a milestone, because by retaking the town and taking out the infected, I think that definitely counts as defeating a notable foe. So we can mark progress on our main quest to realign the orbital stabilizers. We're up to 6 out of 10. And I think we'll just kind of cut forward in time a little bit, kind of 5 or 10 minutes or whatever from after the point at which Archer and the pilot have kind of suited back up after they've had a pause to kind of catch their breath. Luna is now kind of stabilized. We have 2 dead guards and 1 that is catatonic. So Archer and the pilot better just kind of get on with this and press on. And that's what they're doing. And we join them as they're walking up Main Street, kind of walking slowly towards the dish and the complex that sits at its base. And they're still scanning for threats, kind of ever vigilant. And they've been moving kind of 50 or so meters when they come across a body, and it's one of the infected. And the pilot, who obviously missed all of this and didn't see any of them in action, kind of steps in and stoops down to take a closer look. This one has hardened fungus sprouting out of almost every available crack of their armor, and there's shards of the stuff coming out of the neck piece and kind of covering this poor person's face completely so they can't see. The right hand is twisted like a gnarled root, and the fingers are fused together painfully. And the entire body is covered in patches of the thick moss, this lichen that seems to cover everything else here. And the pilot takes out his knife and scrapes away some of the mossy growth from the chest plate of the armor. And underneath he reveals an insignia. It's a simple logo. It's kind of like a stylized globe with the letter P and the number 12 wrapped around. And now Archer is kind of leaning in to take a look, and it's not something he recognizes. And he says, "Who were they?" And the pilot sheathes his knife, and with no little concern in his voice says, "Paragons." And Archer kind of shakes his head, and the pilot notices and says, "Mercs. Very expensive mercs." And Archer kind of thinks that kind of doesn't really make that much sense. So says, "Any idea what they'd be doing out here?" And the pilot says, "Whatever it was important to somebody. And I'm guessing it went to shit real fast." And Archer kind of looks around, still seeing nothing, but still paranoid that one of these buildings might contain some horror, says, "Better keep moving." And they do. They keep moving towards the complex, towards the dish. And it's not until they get a little closer that Archer really grasps how big this dish is. It is clearly a hugely powerful piece of equipment. And I think that's also the point at which Archer sort of puts together how much of a big deal this network must be, like how important the algorithm must be. And like from that, he has lots and lots of questions, most of which I'm pretty sure he will not enjoy the answers to. And as they kind of move closer, they come across another body. But this one is much less obvious. It's one of the bodies that Archer observed from when they were up on the ridge with his scopes. One of the ones that was kind of grown over, almost completely covered by this blanket of moss. And the pilot crouches down beside this one too, and it kind of is laying face down. And at first look, it doesn't look like one of the infected. Like any organic growth that's here is kind of on the body, not like growing out of the body. And the pilot kind of digs his foot underneath the corpse and kind of with a big heave kind of like rolls it over, leaving this kind of outline of a body shape of dusty earth underneath where the moss had grown over. And like the body is kind of like surprisingly well preserved. There's little by way of obvious decay. And Archer doesn't recognize the outfit the person is wearing, but the outfit is very clearly distinct. This person wears a bulky ribbed jacket, heavy fatigues, and a really unusual mask. It's pearly white, smooth and featureless, save for a thin slit through which the wearer can see. And this person died, by the looks of things, due to a single gunshot to the abdomen. The pilot lets out a long sigh. And Archer kind of steps in once again and says, okay, who are these guys? And I'm going to roll up a faction name quickly. I think I just need a one-word name. 34 is Jackals. That's perfect. So the pilot says, Jackals. Local, disorganized, pain in the arse. Exactly the kind of group that would shut down an orbital stabilizer and shake down the owner for a ransom. And Archer is kind of like even more confused now and says, you think local bandits would take on high-end mercs? And the pilot says, no, I do not. So what is happening here? Like, what the hell is going on? Like, what could possibly tie together all of these kind of threads that we're kind of tugging at? I think that we're going to ask the Oracle for a bit of advice. We should see what we can roll up and see if that gives us an idea of kind of how these strands come together. So let's ask the Oracle. 14 is cargo. 26 is damaged. Damaged cargo. Hi, future Matt here again. I'm editing once again, this week's episode, and I do hope you're enjoying listening to it, but I just thought I'd pop in again and give you another little glimpse behind the curtain at my process. And just to say, 2 days. It took 2 days to figure out what those Oracle rolls meant. And that's, I think, a new record of how long something has taken me to figure out. And the problem is it's kind of obvious. And maybe not to you people, because, you know, this is kind of referencing episodes that came out like more than a year ago, and you're all busy people, you've got lives to lead, but I make this show, so I don't really have an excuse. So I just wanted to pop in and say, yeah, that's how that happened. I'm quite stupid. And back to the episode. Bye-bye. So Archer and the pilot are cautious and they are wary. There are so many moving parts in play here, and Archer is kind of pretty surprised by how invested the pilot seems, because he's like just a hired gun, and those sorts of kind of like sellswords don't normally care about the why. They just want to get paid and get home alive. But this is kind of both a confusing set of circumstances and also, to the pilot at least, seemingly very significant. And the pilot's reaction is such that these two disparate groups, these kind of high-end mercs and these local bandits, these two groups being in this place must be highly unusual. That's what Archer takes from the pilot's reaction. This is a very strange set of circumstances. I mean, it's strange anyway after what we've just been through, but this is odd. And whilst Archer is kind of like well off the pace of what is going on in this sector because he is new to it, some of this is starting to feel suspiciously familiar. They move through the complex that is underneath the dish, this compound, and there's a simple kind of chain link fence which is just hanging open. There's a few maintenance buildings, the dish itself, and the main operating station, which is the biggest of the buildings. And as before, like it all seems in working order. There's power because the emergency lights are on, and it's a little overgrown, and the door to this low-ceilinged, unglamorous, blocky grey building needs a little encouragement to be opened, but it opens, and it is all as much as it would be during better days, save for there's no one here operating it. And looking at the controls and everything, these kind of banks of equipment, like nothing seems broken, nothing seems damaged, and Archer, like, he has no idea how any of this works. But the one thing that you can see, which is kind of really handy for us and for him, is that there is a manual override for the primary power on the wall, and it's nice and obvious because there's a big sign next to the handle that says like primary power manual override, which is, you know, pretty good. We need some help here. So he kind of moves over to it and he cranks it upwards with kind of like an effort, and the room, like just like that, comes back to life. The kind of gentle hum of the machinery that's been on kind of like low power mode kind of just like intensifies, and then there's kind of like chirping control panels and kind of flashing lights, and then they hear the booming grind of the dish rotating slowly above them, and it kind of causes them to step out of the building and look, because this is a sight, like it's a huge piece of equipment moving slowly, and it's like, you know, it's pretty impressive, and they're looking up at it with a suitable reaction before kind of heading back in and trying to figure out what's going on. And they kind of leave the kind of like booming metallic groan echoing through the valley as they do. Now, I am going to have to roll for this, right? Because like it all looks kind of straightforward in terms of what the machinery is. But like, Archer has no idea how any of it works. Like, he's tech savvy and he is resourceful, but this is like a massive, complicated piece of equipment and kind of machinery. So we're gonna have to roll for it, I think. So like, there is no operate dish move in Starforged, unfortunately. So I think this is going to be actually face danger. Which says, when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And like, it's not dangerous like per se, but there is an inherent risk here, which is why I'm going to make this move. It says when you attempt something risky, and that risk is that like Archer will like break this thing like completely, and then there's nothing we can do. So that is like the opposite of what we swore to do. So we're going to be facing danger, and we're going to be doing so using our expertise, focus, and observation. So it is going to be facing danger, rolling, plus wits. Well, hello there, strong hit with a match. Where was this energy when Luna was being blown up? Like, is that our first ever strong hit with a match? It might be our first ever natural one. We might have got one with a momentum burn before. I can't quite remember, but I will take it. And Archer will too. So on a strong hit, you are successful, take +1 momentum. So up to 4 momentum now. And Archer's obviously just kind of there, kind of running his hands kind of like across his chin, trying to figure out like how some of this works, like, and what to do. And like, I think because we rolled this strong hit with a match, I think we need it to be suitably cool here, and I think kind of give it a suitable bit of Archer Barlow flavor. So I think he moves over to the main console and kind of looks it over, and none of it seems to make much sense to him. But he does notice there is a message on the main central monitor, and it's flashing there, kind of green on black, and it says, "Initiate sequence, yes or no." And he kind of just stops and thinks, it can't really be that easy, can it? And kind of just presses the Y key. And as he does, like, all of the other monitors come on, showing kind of like equations and crunching numbers, and like showing little diagrams of the dish and the beacon that's in the planet's orbit. And Archer just kind of stands back like, what did I touch? And like the pilot joins him, like kind of looking at all this stuff just kind of sort of happening. And then this loading bar appears on the screen, and the two of them just kind of watch it slowly tick up towards 100%. And as it gets closer and closer, the sound of the dish moving gets louder and louder, and the loading bar turned red, and then the siren begins to sound before then it all goes suddenly quiet as it reaches 100%, and the screen flashes the message: "Initialization sequence complete. Begin stabilization. Yes or no." And again, like, he just kind of looks at the pilot and like shrugs and reaches down and slowly like presses yes. And then a few more screens light up, and there's more beeping before the message just reads, "Stabilization complete." And everything just sort of goes quiet, just settles down, just kind of settles into this kind of steady rhythm. Every red error message is replaced by a green one, and the siren stops, and the lights stop flashing and start to kind of glow and twinkle, and Archer kind of looks at the screen, then looks at the pilot and says, "That was a freebie?" And the pilot says, "Then let's go." And they do. They head back out of the building and are about to leave the compound underneath the dish. But before they do, the pilot stops dead in his tracks because he has seen something. Something has caught his eye off to the right, and he starts moving towards it. And outside, the light is starting to fade. And Archer can't quite see in this kind of like gloomy, dusky light what the pilot is looking at. But he follows behind and sees that the pilot is walking towards a large mound of earth covered in thick green and yellow moss. And Archer's like, okay, if you want to look at a mossy mound, then, you know, like, fill your boots, mate. There's absolutely tons of them around here. But then kind of like the pilot kind of takes his knife out again and starts cutting away at the moss. And Archer kind of watches him do it and is a bit confused, and then realizes that there's the scraping of metal coming from behind where the pilot is putting the knife in, and the pilot cuts a square about a few feet across, and it kind of flops down to the ground, and they both look at what is revealed underneath. It's metal paneling and what looks suspiciously like a bullet hole. A big bullet hole. Archer kind of leans in and tries to look through it, but it's kind of clogged up with moss on the inside. And the pilot continues cutting, and Archer moves in too and to do the same, and it quickly becomes clear that this is a spaceship. This is a small, boxy spaceship, the type of unremarkable cargo hopper that you would see making short-range drops just about anywhere in the Forge. And the pilot keeps cutting away until he reveals a set of sliding doors. He jams his knife into the handle and pops it loose, allowing him to pull the doors open. And inside, there's more moss, dense and thick moss, but it's a much richer green. And Archer can smell its distinctly earthly aroma, and that olfactory response sparks something in his brain, and he's now starting to put two and two together. He steps inside the transport, and what was hard to see from the outside now becomes clear. There are figures sat in the ship, figures, two of them, sat on either side of the cargo hold, frozen in a defensive pose, hands out, covering their faces. And they look very much like organic versions of the people who died at Pompeii. Right? You've seen those images before. That's what they're like. And on the floor between them is a big box, like a crate-sized box. And Archer kneels down beside it and uses his hand to scrape away some of the thick moss that covers it. And he reveals what looks like a bullet hole, a big bullet hole. And scraping away more, he reveals an insignia, and this time it is one he does recognize. It is made by a series of interlocking squares, and the text reads, Mahari Outpost. And Archer says, "Well, I'll be goddamned." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. And please do check out the Bad Spot Patreon, where you can find all kinds of cool perks and really support the work I'm doing. I'll be back next week, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.